Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. This is the first video in a three-part series that I plan to do discussing the Backrooms movie. While many have their own takes on what the symbolism means so far, I think I can shine a bit more light on all the aspects of this movie that shape the narrative as a whole. Without much more rambling, let's discuss the story of Clark and his relation to the Backrooms. The movie opens with a time marker being presented before us with found footage. The time marker specifically notes that this was recorded in 1990. All we can gather from that, given how time has been shown to interact with the Backrooms, is that this specific segment takes place with somebody who believes they are in that time period, but with the technology, interior design, VHS tapes, and camera quality that we later see in this movie, we can assume that 1990 is when all of the events take place. The character we follow, who is currently unnamed, is likely a member of Async, given the hazmat suit that he wore in preparation for the trek into the Backrooms. We quickly come across a setup that looks jerry-rigged to create function, specifically within the structure, with cords stretching endlessly outward as both a functionality and a way to locate the main unit. Upon reaching this room, the cameraman barricades the entrance. We will find out why he is taking such precautions soon enough. He moves to the setup and begins to use the console as a means of calling for help. With not much to go on, we can only assume that he is lost or that his current situation is one of dire circumstances. The call is then interrupted by a seagull flying into the room. We haven't really seen many animals, if any, in the Backrooms at this point, but it's probably safe to assume that they come in the same way that people would, simply by finding an opening. What is more alarming is the seagull's behavior. It first flies into a wall at a speed that incapacitates it briefly, before it suddenly takes off, continuing in the direction of its frightful trajectory. An animal like a seagull lacks awareness of the horror that would come from entering the Backrooms, so from this experience we can gather that it is fleeing from something. The found footage begins panning through rooms within the Backrooms, discovering many random items with seemingly no purpose that symbolize real-world fixtures like clocks and furniture, among other things. Furniture and pirate iconography are particularly present within these opening scenes, as we discover that these are reflective of items that we will be seeing in the near future, as they relate to our titular character. The pirate ship steering wheel clocks and no credit sign are also unique enough that we can only deduce that they are based on the Ottoman Empire furniture store, which is an awesome name for a furniture store, all things considered. We also see leaves and feathers upon closer inspection of a ceiling tile. We can also hear sounds of a pier or beach, complete with a bell ringing with other seagulls, implying that this is the entrance where the seagull came from. Unfortunately for our cameraman, this means that what the seagull was running from is likely still nearby. Something our cameraman finds out the hard way when he turns around and sees a grotesque figure watching him from a distance. A chase ensues, but is short-lived, as the cameraman gets cornered and is presumably killed by the entity. We never get a good look at the entity during the scene, but a freeze frame on his leg shows a peg leg. This will become important later. Turns out the cameraman doesn't always survive. Our first scene with Clark is overlapped with advice from his therapist. As we are wordlessly introduced to Clark's current life, complete with an unpopular, desperate furniture store, architect sketches and imagery, stacked bills, and a crumpled, cluttered office, we are given context to this with the accompanying monologue, which I will read in its entirety. We all have habits, behaviors that keep us walking in circles, reaching for the same solutions over and over, hoping that they will take you somewhere new, but they don't. And still, it's the neural pathway of least resistance. The path you made is the one that kept you safe when you were a child. You learned to push people away before they could hurt you, and now, as an adult, you are still stuck right where you started, alone. From this, we gather that Clark is unfulfilled, a man with dreams but seemingly no clear road to success. His therapist is trying to convey to him that he is expecting change in his life without actually changing the habits that put him there in the first place. Clark's first reaction to this is one of deflection. He says that maybe he isn't meant to be around people, because he feels internally wired to push people away before he can hurt them. To this, Mary asks if he thinks that anyone deserves to be alone. Clark says maybe being alone isn't such a bad thing. Mary then suggests that if he knows that his current path gets him nowhere, maybe he should find a new one. Mary then begins an exercise of roleplay to reenact one of Clark's memories to assess Clark's behavior and mindset. To Clark's apprehension, he agrees and they roleplay the night Clark's ex-wife, Barbara, left him. I got home late. She was asleep. I broke a glass. She came to see what happened. I was drunk. I was angry. I'm sorry I woke you. Maybe if you come home earlier, we could spend time together. I came home immediately after the store. Be honest, I can smell it on your breath. I had a few beers. Define a few. I needed to wind down. You always wind down. You're always at the store. You want kids, right? We both do. Having a family takes money. Someone has to work around here. Who pays for everything? Me. Can I talk now? No. What happens if we have a kid and you leave me with the bill? Now you're being cruel. I'm being realistic. Just because you didn't get to be an architect, I am an architect. I'm just stuck selling furniture because you won't help me. From this, we gather that Clark still has many unresolved issues, but we can at least credit him for taking the first steps, which would be seeking professional help, so that his problems can be outlined and addressed. The rest of the work falls on Clark directly to try to change his life to break the cycle of his unhappiness. Going back to the loops discussion, it's easy to choose the path you are on and continue in the habits that you have built. But sometimes, for your own sake, those habits need to be broken. And not just for your sake, but for others as well, so that you don't lash out at others as a result of your own internal struggles and resentment. Mary addresses this behavior directly after analyzing his behavior in this exchange. After this, we see Clark being filmed in his captain persona in a commercial for his furniture store, the Ottoman Empire. During the filming, Clark sits down on a chair and it breaks, causing him to call for Bobby to cut the recording. Here we meet Kat, the likely only other employee of Clark's, and her boyfriend, who happens to have access to a camera. I only mention them now because they will come up again. Clark tells her to open the store, to which she replies that it already is, which shows just how slow business is for Clark and how unsuccessful that business really is. We then cut to Clark meeting with an electrician in his office. The building has been having power difficulties and it's causing problems. When they both reach the breaker, the electrician expresses confusion about the layout and installation of it, particularly a switch at the bottom that runs diagonal to the rest with no hint as to what it does or why it's even there. This is, as far as I can tell, besides the outages, the first indicator of the Backrooms' influence that Clark notices. Outages usually aren't supernatural and have a reason, but this switch seemingly appeared out of nowhere and seems to serve no purpose. After hours, Clark is watching TV and drinking. We know that Clark was kicked out of his house, so after hours when Clark is watching TV and drinking, his preferred method of unwinding, it is when this TV switches from a normal broadcast to footage that we can tell it is from the Backrooms. But to Clark, it is simply an interruption to his regular program. That is, until his TV turns off and we can see it's a result of the power issues. Clark storms down to the breaker where he angrily flips every switch off, including the diagonal one. When the lights turn off completely, Clark notices something. A mysterious glimmer from the wall provides enough curiosity to provoke discovery. As he goes to touch the mysterious wall, he falls through and lands on the other side. More skeptical and curious than afraid, he seeks to find some answers about his situation. The first room contains a pile of furniture, representing the furniture store, and is an immediate heavy bastardization from the original store. The following rooms are expansive and seem to be structured without rhyme or reason. While exploring, he finds the seagull, which is now dead, with a broken neck. Whether that was by impact or by strangulation, we can only theorize, but this does provide more continuity. First, we know that the events of the opening scene did precede the events transpiring now, which means that the entity is still a threat and is still out there. While exploring, he does hear the entity, and when he calls out to it, the result seems to be anger, as the entity smashes the cardboard cutout that he came across in his search through the backrooms. Although he doesn't get a good look at the creature, he does take this time to escape the way he came, but not without grabbing a stool for seemingly proof. It wouldn't really be sufficient evidence to prove that the backrooms existed, but it would be enough to prove to Clark that this wasn't all just a dream. After this, we see Clark later return to therapy looking visually disheveled and emotionally disturbed. Some sort of time skip has occurred between his first interaction with the backrooms and the current meetup with his therapist. We don't know how long this is, but it could have been days, weeks, or just sort of the next natural occurrence he has with his therapist. He tells her about his discovery in the store, and he notes the strange properties of the surroundings within. Nonsensical things seem to have patterns, but are littered with imperfections, as if the rooms are reflections of the real world. He specifically describes it with a notable quote: "Imagine you describe a dog to someone who has never seen one before, and then asking them to draw it. They might get some things right, but not everything." He then continues, "There are people. I've heard voices and things move around when I'm not looking." He even pulls out a sketch to show that he has mapped all of the nearby rooms so far and their properties. After what seems like the constant ravings of a madman have concluded, Mary expresses natural suspicion and suggests that these experiences are likely due to alcohol withdrawals, and Clark notes that he has stopped drinking. Knowing that Clark is right in this scenario makes his next few actions understandable. Clark sets off to find proof and bring it back to reveal this discovery. Needing some help to gather proof, Clark enlists the help of Bobby and Kat, who are skeptical, but Clark is paying them extra, so they agree to help him out. Clark also needs their help because they have access to a camera. While exploring, they come across a steep, ramped corridor that Clark seeks to explore and map out. Bobby agrees to scope it out first, as he is the one who is responsible for the camera. They tie a rope to him and anchor it to a nearby bed, so that they can pull him up if anything goes wrong. When reaching the bottom, he discovers piles of dirty laundry, perhaps reflected dirty, or another distortion of the backrooms. Bobby is particularly startled by an end apartheid shirt that loosely matches the one we saw him wearing in his first appearance. The political message is also another indicator of the early 90s time period that this movie takes place in. Bobby continues to explore the area, but as he sees something move in the shadows, he quickly calls to be pulled up by the other two. He manages to climb out in time, but the rope he is tied to still has a lot of slack that goes down the corridor. And as they try to undo the knot, he is pulled down, and despite Clark and Kat's best efforts, they are not able to save him, and he is dragged into the corridor. And as the two watch in horror as Bobby falls into the darkness, the bed frame tied to him also gets pulled, knocking the other two and the camera down in the process. At the bottom of the corridor, we see Bobby's corpse dragged away, and Kat goes running after the entity responsible. Clark grabs the camera and runs away from the entity, and as he becomes isolated again, Clark's actions in the scene show his true character. Maybe he didn't wish for this to happen, but out of everything, helping Kat, saving Bobby, he grabs the camera because the proof needs to be shown above all else. While running, he comes to slow down when he comes across a dark room with a Christmas tree. Going further, Clark's moment of respite is ended when more undocumented entities start chasing him. Except the dude in the chair with the lamp, he's just chilling. He's probably my favorite entity. He's great. I love him every time he's on screen. But Clark keeps running and he comes across the pool rooms. The section of the Backrooms are named after their pool, bath, and shower iconography. When he reaches a dead end, Kat starts calling out to him from the other side of the wall. It must be some kind of one-way mirror because she can see him, but not the other way around. He sets down the camera and tries to figure out how to reach her. It is then that something large picks up the camera and shifts the scene to a downward angle. Kat points out the entity, but it's too late. As the camera cuts out, the fate of Clark and Kat are left uncertain. We then see Mary go to the furniture store where Clark works. Out of curiosity or obligation, we can only speculate for now. I'll go more in depth on her motivations in the next video that comes after this one. This is part 1 in a likely 3-part breakdown of this movie. The next video will focus on Mary and her complementary story and how it binds her to Clark and the Backrooms as a whole. Anyways, we don't know how long it has been since the last therapy session with Clark, so it could be that she is very worried about him. His absence is especially concerning given the context of the Backrooms and how he left to get proof. As she enters the store, she reaches the sub-level where she sees a map of the Backrooms on a whiteboard that matches the sketch Clark showed her along with the taped outline of a door on the wall. As she approaches it, she sees a fly disappear into it, prompting her to try to touch the wall, which causes her to go in. While exploring, she sees the same things that Clark initially saw, up until she reaches a wall that has interesting wording and imagery on it. The imagery and wording, seemingly mostly random and bizarre, with lines like, "Why think in terms of magic? Be realistic. Here and now is a two-way street. Tables don't bleed blood," with random figures accompanying them, like an async agent, and most threateningly of all, is a terrifying sketch of Captain Clark holding someone. It's then that a figure is seen just out of sight and is revealed to have been watching her. She calls out for Clark since he would be the only one she knows would be down here, and to our surprise, it is. She asks how long he's been in here, but before he can respond, another sound is heard of a monstrous entity. Clark tells her to stay calm, it's only me. Which, at this point, raises more questions than answers. On top of the surprising fact that Clark is still alive, Clark then begins to put Mary in a chokehold to knock her out, saying, "I'm sorry, it's for your own good." This brings us to the dinner scene. As Mary comes to find that she is tied to a chair and is also greeted with her loop speech that was given near the beginning of the film, only this time it's Clark telling it to her as a means to establish what has led them both to this moment. Clark describes the Backrooms world as a mess, but also beautiful. The people, the buildings, all misremembered versions of themselves. If it wasn't clear how Clark's mental state was going at this point, he stabs one of the entities with a knife to prove that they don't feel pain. Clark envies the freedom of existence without pain or suffering, and he seeks to gain this through living in the Backrooms, separated from all the pains of his previous life. Just in case you were wondering how he could live in the Backrooms this long, he found out that he can eat the entities. As he tears into the flesh of a particular entity sat at the table, true to Clark's word, it does not make any reaction to show pain, suffering, or even sadness. Clark then goes to open the fridge to get something, and it reveals the fate of Kat, who is now just a head in the fridge. "This is my assistant. I tried to help her too." This, of course, horrifies Mary more so than the other gruesome things that have already transpired. If I untie you, you would just become more lost than you are right now. You would end up in the same place, just like the paths that you keep talking about. an obvious jab at the fact that Clark sees living here as his new path, and he thinks his therapist's disdain for it is hypocritical. Mary is still trying to get Clark to let her leave, so she agrees to do anything. Under these terms, Clark wants to prove his own self-righteousness through another reenactment of the time Barbara kicked him out of the house. This scene, like many other examples in the Backrooms, is a reflection of the events that occurred in real life, except this time, it's a chimera of both the scene reenactment for therapy and the actual events that led to Clark being kicked out of the house. To make it complete, Clark scalps the hair off of Barbara's entity and puts it on Mary, while the Barbara entity does not react to this at all. The reaction, or lack thereof, is probably a sign that she was numb to the pain that he inflicted in the relationship until it became too much. Now is probably a good time to discuss her design in the Backrooms. Aside from a particular detail, she is almost normal. What stands out is that she has multiple faces, likely a nod to the betrayal that Clark felt in her leaving him, as betrayal would be synonymous with someone who is referred to as two-faced. And with that, we begin the dinner scene with Clark's reenactment. I'm sorry I broke the glass and woke you up. I know how you like to sleep early. I was at the store late. I guess I lost track of time. I was checking inventory, but then I stopped off for a few beers. Define a few. As many as I wanted. Because this is my house. I pay for it. I pay for your school, the time off school. I pay for the roof over your head. You want kids, right? Well, someone has to work around here. Just because you didn't get to be an architect, I am an architect. I'm just stuck selling furniture because someone won't help me. Despite going over the same situation in the real world, the backroom retelling shines light on the realities of Clark's character. Ironically enough, I think that this version may have been more accurate to the actual events that happened rather than what was roleplayed in the therapy session. In this version, Clark is cold, stoic, angry, and determined. Here, when asked how many beers he had, he replies with as many as he wanted, because this is my house, doing more to call out Barbara and reject his own self-destructive behaviors that he had initially. While we saw a glimpse of that in therapy, here all of its true colors are shown. We see clearly now someone who is finally in control of the situation. Someone who is so desperate to achieve this that he resorts to kidnapping and murder. It is here that the therapist finally tells him off for who he is and what he has become. I'm not your wife. I've never met her. You want to know why your wife left you? It wasn't the drinking, the late nights, or the anger. It was the whining. Nothing is ever your fault, is it? Whether he blames his job, the world, his wife, his brain, at the center, it is him and his stubborn arrogance that is to blame. He is to blame for his issues, and he will never accept it. Not even when it's told to his face. When he considers accepting that, he decides he doesn't want to change. He clings to the Backrooms because it is a force that doesn't push against him. No expectations or responsibility, and no reason to change. Forever alone, but never lonely. Because maybe he never needed anyone to begin with. Pushed to her limits, and likely also attributed to the kidnapping, Mary tells him that he doesn't have to change, and he expresses joy in this. Clark finally agrees to let her go after this interaction, but as he goes to free her, the reflection of Barbara runs into a corner and begins screaming. This is because we are now being graced with the presence of the Captain. The entity that we have been encountering many times up to this point will now be referred to as the Captain, now that we have a good look at his appearance. The monstrous being bears resemblance to the pirate version of Clark used in his commercials, which implies that there is likely a combination of influences from the individual and those who perceive them. This might also be one of the reasons that the reflections are so warped and imperfect. We know that this is the same entity that we saw in the beginning because it sports the same peg leg that the other entity was shown to have. The Captain, acting seemingly docile in spite of his previous encounters, is being reasoned with by Clark. We can assume that based on the encounters that Clark has had with the entity and his lack of fear in this moment, that there has been some sort of agreement or partnership made between the two. Clark tells the captain that we don't have to change, it's just the way we're wired. We know that up to this point, Clark has lashed out in anger at all the things that he blames for his shortcomings. So when he finally gains the realization that he himself is also to blame, his reflection now has another target to remove. As the captain gently picks up Clark, he bites down on him and throws him around the room. A brutal end for a brutal character. This scene may have been foreshadowed since the moment Mary entered the Backrooms. The graffiti on the wall shows Captain Clark holding someone that is bleeding with blood coming down from his mouth, possibly a reference to the painting Saturn devouring his son, to reflect the relationship the two share. Although this seems to be a role reversal, as Clark is consumed by his reflection and therefore becomes the sun in this painting, it could represent how Clark was consumed by his own ego, as he finally accepted that he would never change. His character met both a physical and metaphysical conclusion. While I am personally not supportive of any character deserving death, many people could see justification in this moment of retribution. Clark's death is a result of the manifestation of his own anger and willingness to kill. Maybe Clark could have turned out different if he had people support and correct his behaviors before they became so heavily ingrained in his psyche. But the tragedy lies in a virtuous cycle of Clark pushing people away before they can help him and building resentment on anyone who tries to suggest that he needs to change. Even though Clark dies, his influence, pain, and ambition lives on in the Backrooms. All the people that Clark hurts are just collateral in the wake of his goals. Since he blames others for all of his shortcomings, people like Barbara and Mary all deserve his wrath and to feel the pain that he endured with his unfulfilled life. This is reflected all the same in Captain Clark's murder of Bobby and Kat. As unenthusiastic young employees of Clark's, he bears the internal resentment that Clark has for them. What we know about the captain so far is that he is monstrous, passive to Clark until the dinner scene, and he bears resemblance to the pirate version of Clark, looks towering and threatening as a result of how Barbara probably viewed him in his rage-induced episodes, and just as Clark is able to use his architectural and spatial awareness skills to map out the Backrooms, the captain is also shown to be adept in the layout of the Backrooms as seen in each of the chase scenes. You'd think that once Clark was killed that the entity would be satisfied with its motivation to gain control of his life, but there remains one last threat. As Mary uses Clark's murder to escape, the entity starts trailing behind her. And that concludes Clark's story within the Backrooms. Join me in the next video where we will explore Mary's side and how she is tied to Clark and the Backrooms as well. Let me know down below if you guys had any other thoughts about the movie, and let me know if I missed anything that I should add to the discussion on Mary's part. But with that, I will see you all in the next video.